Well, easing back into the homework routine can be challenging for many parents across the country, and kids too. This morning, we're arming you with the information to help you and your child win that homework battle and get back on track. To do that, we're joined by Ruth Rumack, an academic support specialist with 20 years experience under her belt. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So you say the best tactic is sort of to identify your child's homework traits.
Yes.
And you identify 5 categories. And so we'll start with the first one, is the procrastinator.
Everybody knows one.
Everybody knows it. So how do you help your child if they are the type of person who puts things off and off and off?
Well, I think it's important to let them know that it's okay, that they need to look at the big picture first. So often procrastinators have a bit of anxiety. They're not sure that they can actually do the work. So one thing to do is set a larger schedule so that they know what is coming up ahead and how to chunk it or break it down into smaller pieces.
So it's not necessarily laziness.
Definitely not. I think most kids feel that they can't do it, they may believe that they can't do it, or they don't know how to start.
Okay.
So if they don't know how to start, a good trick is just to start a timer. So let's say, let's do it for 10 minutes. Let's see what we can do in those first few minutes, and then usually once they realize that they can do it, they gain confidence, they're off to the races.
Now, what do you do if your child is a perfectionist?
That's a tough one. I think, often that also relates to anxiety of being perfect. They have very high expectations for themselves. So one of the things we talk about at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space is let's just do an 80% rule. Let's do this to the best of our ability right now, and we'll come back and look at the smaller areas, the spelling, the grammar, second. Often it's also helpful to scribe for your child. Talk about the ideas first, and then get them to say it out loud, and you write it down for them. Then turn it back and say, look at these great ideas that you have. Now let's put them into sentences.
Some kids aren't naturally organized, so what do you do if you have a disorganized child?
I think that's a tricky one because, they're not always under your control, and they can't be. But if you have a disorganized child, it's good to be in touch with the teacher. Know what's going on in the classroom so that you can facilitate at home. Big calendars, iCal, Google Cal, things that are electronic are really good. And a good tip is to, for an older child, take a picture of the board. If your teacher allows cameras in the classroom, which many do in certain situations, you can take a picture of the homework board so that you don't forget what you need to do.
Oh, that's smart. What do you do if your child only does the bare minimum to scrape by, which I may or may not have been growing up?
The minimalist. I call it the minimalist, right?
That's a very nice way of putting it.
So, there's an expectation set by the teacher. Do a minimum of 2 sentences. And that child comes home and writes 2 sentences exactly, I'm done, goodbye. Yeah. It's good to go back to that work and say, you know what, I really like your idea here. Could we expand it a little bit? Yeah. Or even give them a checklist and say, every time you finish your homework, let's look at these 3 things or 4 things or longer if it's an older student, and make sure that you have really met the criteria.
Lastly, and I think this is sort of the basement, the most worrisome one, what if your child has no motivation?
That's tough. That's really tough. I think that it's important to get at the bottom of it because usually a child will do well if they can do well. And if there's something else going on, it's important for a parent to know.
My question is, are these archetypes crystallized forever? Can children jump from one to the other? Can they evolve into something different?
Absolutely. I think at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space, we work with children on a continuum and on a regular basis. So after a certain amount of practice and explicit instruction and reducing that anxiety, most children will shift. And, if they have expectations for themselves, then it's something that they're working towards. It's not set in stone, and it's something that we definitely want to encourage growth.
Thank you very much. And encouragement is always a good rule of thumb.
Very big deal.
Thank you so much for being here this morning.